The rain hit the windshield in angry, slashing lines as Emily Cranmore pulled her car up the overgrown driveway. Headlights swept across the crumbling stone pillars, still bearing the family crest, half faded by time and moss. The house loomed ahead like a sleeping beast, its roof sagging, its windows dark and hollow. She stepped out slowly, umbrella trembling in her grip, her boots sinking into the wet earth. Thunder cracked above, but it was the silence beneath that unnerved her more. The kind of silence that watches you. She stood still, the memories clawing back. Smoke, screaming, the smell of burning wood. This was the house she once called home. The front door groaned open under her hand, swollen from years of neglect. The hinges shrieked as if warning her back. Inside, the air was damp and stale, filled with the scent of mildew and forgotten things. Dust danced in the beam of her flashlight like suspended ash. The grand staircase loomed ahead, now barely holding together. Wallpaper peeled down the hallway like dead skin, curling inwards. Her footsteps echoed, too loud, like someone or something might respond. She stepped further in, scanning the space that was once full of life and laughter. Now, it was a tomb of memories no one had buried properly. To her right, the drawing room remained mostly untouched, furniture still cloaked in dust-covered sheets. On the fireplace mantel sat a tarnished silver frame containing a family portrait, her mother, her father, and herself as a child. She froze. There was someone else in the picture. A young girl next to her, half faded, whose face was scratched out. She didn't remember having a sister. Her hands trembled slightly as she returned the frame. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly down the hall. It came in regular intervals, like a ticking clock in a place that should have stopped keeping time long ago. She followed the noise instinctively, past the collapsed parlor door and toward the main hallway. A dark stain on the floorboards trailed toward the staircase. Old, but distinct. Like dried blood that had soaked through from another time. Her boots creaked with every step, and she could feel the eyes of the house settle on her. It didn't feel like an empty building. It felt like something had been waiting. She reached the stairs, pausing to glance up into the second-floor darkness. Lightning flashed through the stained glass window above, illuminating the broken chandelier and the peeling portraits of dead ancestors who stared down in silence. Step by cautious step, Emily ascended. The old wood groaned beneath her weight, some planks bowing unnaturally. At the top, the hallway stretched out like a dark throat. Her old bedroom door stood closed, but it was the nursery at the end that called to her. Even before she saw it, she felt it, like a pressure behind her eyes, a whisper at the edge of thought. She moved forward, slowly, each step more hesitant than the last. The air grew colder. A faint scent of burnt fabric and baby powder lingered. The door to the nursery was slightly ajar, trembling as if afraid of being opened. Her hand reached out and pushed the door open. It creaked inward to reveal a room preserved in decay. The once pastel walls were now sickly yellow and grey, streaked with mold and age. The crib still stood in the corner, collapsed in on itself, like something had crushed it from within. Toys lay scattered on the floor, their plastic eyes worn, their colours dulled. In the centre of the room sat a wooden rocking chair, slowly swaying. But it wasn't the chair that caught her breath. It was the doll resting in it. Porcelain, pristine, its glass eyes glossy as if freshly cleaned, and it was staring at her. The doll had long, dark hair, braided with a pale blue ribbon. Its dress was old-fashioned, lace-trimmed, delicately stitched, untouched by dust. Emily stepped closer, flashlight trembling in her hand, The closer she got, the more unnatural it looked. Too perfect, too clean. She swore the eyes followed her every step. She bent slightly, inspecting it, breath fogging the air. Then she saw the name stitched on the hem of its dress. Annabelle. Her heart sank. Something about that name rang inside her head like a forgotten lullaby. She took a step back, but the rocking chair didn't stop. It rocked harder, creaking steadily now. She turned away quickly, her chest tight. On the wall above the crib was something written in faded red, barely visible in the dim light. She stepped closer. It looked like a child's handwriting. 4 words. "Don't forget your sister." A chill ran through her spine as she turned back to the doll. It hadn't moved, but now its head was slightly tilted, just a little more than before. She froze, unable to breathe. The room groaned around her. From outside, a branch scratched the window like fingernails, slow and deliberate. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, she heard a faint, rhythmic knocking, like footsteps pacing below. The air shifted, as if the house exhaled all at once. Emily stumbled backward and fled the nursery, slamming the door behind her. She stood in the hallway, heart hammering, skin clammy. It felt like something had awoken. Her hands shook as she looked down and realized she still held the photo frame from downstairs. The scratched-out girl was more visible now. The lines were fading. She could almost see her face. A sick realization crept in. This wasn't the house bringing memories back. It was the house giving them to her. Or worse, creating them anew. A soft creak echoed from behind the nursery door. Emily didn't look back. She returned to her childhood bedroom and shut the door tight. Dust coated everything. Her old toys lay in pieces. A broken mobile still hung above the bed. She collapsed into the dusty mattress, exhausted. Her mind raced, trying to separate fact from feeling. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to believe the house was just old, just haunted by echoes. But beneath the layers of dust, something still breathed. That last bit of comfort, something still breathed, something that remembered her. And down the hall, behind that nursery door, a doll rocked gently, eyes fixed on the past it refused to let die. Night settled in like a dark fog. The wind howled outside the boarded windows. Emily pulled her jacket tighter and tried to sleep, unaware that the doll's chair had stopped rocking, and the crying had already begun. The rain had softened into a whisper, tapping against the boarded windows like fingernails. Emily lay on the creaky mattress, eyes wide open, unable to sleep. The silence inside the house was unnerving, too still, too unnatural. Every creak of the wood felt intentional, like footsteps holding their breath. She wrapped her coat tighter around her, listening to the darkness pressing in from every corner of the room. Her flashlight sat beside her, its beam fading. Somewhere in the distance, the grandfather clock that no longer worked let out a single tick. She sat up abruptly, her ears straining. Something was moving upstairs, something light, something careful. Then she heard it. A soft, muffled cry, thin and wavering, like a child trying not to be heard. Her heart stopped. It was unmistakable. It was coming from the nursery. She froze, every muscle stiff with tension. The crying came again, faint but real, high-pitched and echoing slightly, as if carried through walls too old to hide anything anymore. Emily reached for the flashlight, its dim light flickering back to life. Her breath fogged the air as she stepped toward the door, every instinct screaming for her to stay put. But something stronger pulled her forward. Curiosity, guilt, memory. She opened the door. The hallway was darker than before, even though she'd left a lantern burning. The flame was now gone, snuffed out. Shadows clung to the ceiling and slithered along the floor like they were alive. The crying had stopped the moment she opened her door, As if it had heard her coming, she tiptoed down the hall, passing the rows of crooked picture frames that seemed to lean toward her. Her flashlight flickered. As she neared the nursery, the air grew cold, ice cold. Turning her breath to mist, the crying resumed, now louder, more distinct. It was right on the other side of the nursery door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, now slick with moisture. The moment she touched it, the crying ceased again. Abrupt, unnatural. She pushed the door open slowly, flashlight casting long shadows through the ruined room. The rocking chair was still. The crib still collapsed, but the doll was no longer seated. Her heart dropped. She scanned the room with growing panic, stepping forward. On the shelf across the room, the doll now sat upright, her head turned directly toward Emily. Her eyes, glassy and hollow, stared with such intensity it made Emily recoil. She hadn't moved it. She was sure of it. Then came a new sound, a gentle creaking from behind her. Emily spun around. The rocking chair had started again, ever so slightly, moving with the rhythm of breath. Back and forth, back and forth. No one sat in it. No breeze moved it. She backed away, suddenly feeling like she was being watched from every angle. Her flashlight dimmed again, forcing her to slap it. When it returned, the doll had shifted. Only a few inches, but its head now tilted slightly. Its mouth seemed more open, as if mid-whimper. A chill ran down her spine, deeper than anything she'd ever felt. She turned to leave, but the nursery door had shut behind her. "You wanted to come too?" Mebia's voice was hard and silty, and her eyes were blind. Mebia's pinched feet patted the ground. When the nursery door had shut behind her, she turned to leave, but the nursery door had shut behind her. She turned to leave, but the nursery door had shut behind her. She hadn't touched it. Her fingers fumbled for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Her breath caught in her throat as a coldness swept through the room, heavier than before, as though something had stepped into it with her. She heard the crying again, but this time it was inside the room, right beside her. Her legs froze. The sound wasn't just crying, it was sobbing. Heartbroken. Abandoned. She turned slowly and saw nothing, just shadows stretching across the warped walls. But the sound grew louder, rising with anguish, coming from the crib. Emily stepped toward it against her will. Her flashlight blinked, then surged back. The crib was empty, just as before, but soaked now, drenched in some black liquid that looked like ink or blood. She reached down and found a scrap of fabric beneath the slats. It was pale blue ribbon, frayed and damp, the same ribbon the doll wore. The doll tumbled off and hit the ground face first, shattering part of its porcelain cheek. But it didn't stop staring. Its eyes still moved, tracking her. She lunged for the door again, pounding on it now. It opened suddenly, too easily, as if something had released it on purpose. She stumbled out, breathing hard, heart slamming against her ribs. She turned back to look inside. The nursery was quiet again. The rocking chair had stopped. The doll lay where it had fallen, but now, next to it, lay another ribbon, untouched, perfectly tied. She didn't remember seeing two ribbons. Emily ran back to her room, slammed the door and shoved a dresser against it. Her hands were shaking. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't know why. Part of her was grieving, deeply, silently, for someone she couldn't remember. That night, she lay in the dark, every sound magnified, every creak a scream in waiting. But the crying didn't return, not again. Just silence, a stillness so deep, it felt like something had paused the world to watch her think. And as her eyes drifted toward her window, she froze. There on the glass, from the inside, were small handprints. Faint. Wet. Child-sized. She stayed awake until morning. Dawn broke in pale shades of grey, casting weak light through the warped glass of the bedroom window. Emily hadn't slept. Her eyes were sunken, red-rimmed, and fixed on the door as if expecting it to creak open on its own. The house had grown quiet again, but not in a comforting way. More like a hunter waiting for its prey to move. She finally stood, determined to find answers. Something was wrong, far deeper than ghosts or tricks of the mind. It was buried in the walls, in her memory, in the silence between cries. And she knew exactly where she had to look now. The attic. The pull-down ladder groaned as she yanked the cord, dust swirling down like ash. She climbed slowly, flashlight clenched between her teeth. The attic stretched wide, low-roofed and cluttered with boxes, trunks, and forgotten fragments of the past. Cobwebs draped from rafters like curtains of rot. The floor creaked with every careful step, threatening to give way. She opened an old cedar trunk and found dolls, dozens of them, each worn, cracked or eyeless, and all staring in the same direction. But in the far corner, hidden beneath a moth-eaten quilt, sat a leather-bound journal. Her mother's handwriting peeked out from the cover, delicate, slanted, urgent. She sat cross-legged on the dusty boards, thumbing through pages brittle with age. The entries began innocently enough. Notes about meals, garden plans, her father's long absences. But soon, the tone shifted. Panic, fear, and confusion crept into every line. One entry caught her breath. Annabelle cries every night. She says Emily doesn't see her. But how can that be? Emily blinked, heart pounding. Another line followed. The doctor says there was only one, but I held them both. I know I did. Her hands trembled. Her mother had believed she had two daughters. Twins. But she had never been told this. Never. Pages detailed strange events. Missing toys. Cold spots in the nursery. Both girls screaming in their sleep. Then another gut-punching line. She went missing during the fire, but I still hear her. Emily's throat tightened. The fire that killed her parents. Had she not been alone after all? She kept reading, the words blurring with tears. Emily doesn't remember her. Maybe she never will. Maybe that's mercy. But the doll remembers. She clutches it every night. A smudge ended the entry, possibly a tear or a burn. Emily slammed the book shut, heart racing. It wasn't just a doll. It was hers. Her sister's. She descended the attic in a daze, clutching the journal tight. The house no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt personal, like a thing that knew her intimately. She walked to the nursery again, door now slightly open as though expecting her. The doll still sat broken where she had left it, but now the head had turned fully toward her. The mouth seemed wider, and from beneath the cracked cheek, something dark leaked, like tar. Emily knelt slowly, her voice shaking. Annabelle. The air grew colder. The room pulsed. The broken crib creaked once, and then, softly, the crying returned. Behind her, she turned, but no one was there. Just shadows stretching unnaturally toward the door. On the wall, the faded words, "Don't forget your sister," were brighter now, as if freshly scrawled. Emily felt her knees weaken. The air was thick with emotion. Grief, loneliness, rage. It wasn't just a haunting. It was abandonment. This spirit wasn't a stranger. It was blood. She walked to the window, wiped the glass, and stared out into the yard. A child's handprint appeared on the inside again, right beside hers. She didn't scream this time. She rested her palm over it. It was warm. A heartbeat pulsed through the glass. Something had changed. She whispered, "I didn't know. I swear." A gust of wind rattled the nursery door, slamming it shut behind her. She didn't move. The crying shifted into soft humming, the lullaby their mother used to sing, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. It was the same as ever. The lullaby their mother used to sing, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. It was the doll trembled once, then stilled. She felt her chest tighten as a vision overtook her, memories not her own. Two girls, identical, holding hands in the garden, laughter, then smoke, screaming, one girl trapped, the other pulled away. She gasped. Her mother had only been able to save one, and Emily had forgotten, or been made to forget. She sat on the floor and opened the journal again, and Emily had been made to forget. She sat on the floor and opened the journal again. At the back, in a folded note, was something chilling. A drawing of the doll. Annabelle, beside a cradle with a second figure drawn in shadow. Her mother had written, "She clings to the doll because that's where her soul was sealed. Until she's remembered." Emily stared at the doll again, its glass eyes gleaming with unnatural life. It wasn't a haunting, it was a prison. A child's spirit locked in porcelain, waiting for the sister who forgot her, damned of fire. Emily whispered, "I remember now. I remember you." And for a moment, the crying stopped completely. The air shifted again. The mirror in the corner fogged from within, and for the first time, a shape appeared in its reflection. A small girl, face burned but eyes bright, standing beside Emily. She didn't speak. She only watched. The doll rolled gently off the shelf and landed upright on the carpet. Emily turned slowly. The doll's ribbon, once frayed, was now perfectly tied. The cracks on its face had begun to heal. Emily felt tears stream down her face, a mixture of fear, guilt, and unspoken reunion. The room was no longer hostile. It was grieving, and maybe forgiving. The lights flickered gently. For the first time since arriving, Emily felt warmth in the nursery. Not safety, but something like peace. She stood slowly, leaving the journal on the shelf beside the doll. As she turned to go, she heard a soft whisper behind her. That night, she didn't hear crying, only the soft sound of humming and the faint creak of a rocking chair. Emily slept, but the house did not. Nightfall returned like a living veil, darker than before, heavier. Emily awoke with a sense that she hadn't been asleep, but suspended, trapped in a limbo of half-dreams and forgotten lullabies. Her limbs were stiff, her head ached with whispers she couldn't remember hearing. Outside her bedroom door, the hallway breathed. Not literally, but the air seemed to throb, expanding and contracting like lungs. She sat up slowly. Her journal had moved from the shelf to the nightstand. It lay open to the drawing of the doll, the ink now smeared, as if someone or something had tried to erase the name written beside it. Annabelle. Emily's fingers hovered over the page, but the moment she touched it, she felt a stabbing pain behind her eyes. A flash of heat, then darkness. She blinked. Her reflection in the mirror across the room wasn't mimicking her. It stood still, smiling faintly. Emily recoiled, heart pounding. The reflection raised its hand. Emily did not. She backed into the wall, eyes locked with the mirror. The figure within slowly lowered its head, and behind it, hovering just over its shoulder, was the doll. But not lifeless. Breathing, smiling. The ribbon on its head unraveled slowly, rising like it was underwater, floating in an unseen current. Down the hall, the nursery door creaked open on its own. That same creaking, deliberate and patient. Emily stepped out of her room, drawn once again toward the source of every terror. But something was different now. The walls seemed to shift subtly, pulsing with memory. Her skin prickled, her breath shallow. She reached the nursery. The light inside flickered, dim but steady. On the floor sat the doll, upright, arms extended, as if waiting. The doll sat down on the floor. Sister Mary knelt next to the doll. Emily approached it cautiously, her hand trembling. When she bent to pick it up, its eyes blinked. Not quickly, slowly, intentionally, and her vision went black. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on the nursery floor. The candlelight danced above her, but it felt distant. She tried to sit up. Her body responded sluggishly, like it wasn't fully hers. The doll sat next to her, silent. Its eyes were closed now, and yet she could hear something. Whispers, like before, but this time they were inside her head. Familiar phrases, forgotten thoughts, nursery rhymes, and then, clear as a bell, "I missed you." Her mouth moved involuntarily, whispering back, "I'm here now." She didn't mean to say it. She wasn't controlling her voice. She stood without willing herself to. Her hands felt cold and strange. In the nursery mirror, she caught her reflection, but it wasn't just her. Her eyes were now darker, wider, and standing just behind her reflection was the girl again. Annabelle, the sister left behind. But she wasn't just watching anymore. She was inside. Emily clutched her head, gasping, stumbling backward. The mirror cracked once, just a hairline fracture across her face. She turned toward the crib and in a daze stepped forward. The ribbon that had belonged to the doll now sat inside, coiled like a snake. She picked it up and the lights flickered violently. Suddenly, Emily dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. Her heartbeat was no longer alone. A second pulse beat within her, out of rhythm, fighting for space. Her eyes rolled back as images flooded her, of smoke, flames, screaming. The feeling of tiny hands reaching through fire, a nursery full of dolls melting in the heat. A little girl watching from behind the wall as everyone forgot her. A mother's cry. Then silence. When Emily came to, she wasn't alone in her own mind. Annabelle was there, not haunting her, possessing her, borrowing her skin. Her hands flexed again, unnatural and stiff. Emily staggered to her feet, her movements now mismatched with her intent. Her head turned without command. Her voice spoke in a soft, unfamiliar whisper. "We're finally together." In the hallway, the lights began to flicker in a sequence, like a pulse moving through the house. Doors creaked open, one by one. The house was waking, responding to its new occupant. Or occupants. Emily looked into the mirror again, but this time there was no reflection, only a dark void. A child's giggle echoed from the depths, followed by the soft sound of a music box playing the lullaby. She walked through the house as if floating, her feet barely touching the floor. Pictures fell from the walls behind her, glass shattering. The wind outside howled as if warning the town below. Emily passed the parlor, the drawing room, the kitchen. All places filled with shadowy memories. But now they were warping, distorting, bleeding together. The entire house had become part of the possession, each board and beam groaning in pain or submission. A familiar voice echoed through the halls. her mother's, but warped, distant. "I'm sorry, I couldn't save you both." Emily's eyes filled with tears that weren't hers. Inside her, a war was waging. Emily's consciousness clawed to surface, fighting the warm, drowning presence that was Annabelle. She screamed internally, trying to speak, to resist, but her lips only whispered, "Play with me." Her fingers twisted unnaturally, reaching for the doll, which now hovered above the nursery floor without strings. The doll spun slowly, then dropped into her hands like it had always belonged there. She cradled it like a mother to a child. Around her, the toys began to twitch. The crib rocked violently on its own. The house was no longer haunted. It was alive, reclaimed. Lightning struck nearby, shaking the walls. Windows shattered inward. The mirrors in every room cracked simultaneously. The air grew thick, almost liquid. Emily stumbled, her vision blurring. And then, for just a second, she screamed aloud. Her scream, hers alone. The sound tore through the nursery like a bomb. The doll shattered. The ribbon burned. Her body dropped to the floor, trembling violently, as smoke rose from her mouth in the shape of a small girl. The spirit of Annabelle hovered there, watching, but she wasn't angry. She looked sad. She reached for Emily, then vanished in a sudden pull of wind and light. Silence returned, and Emily, in the same body, felt the same solace, a small silver light. Silence returned. Emily gasped, chest heaving. She lay on the floor of the nursery, the broken doll scattered beside her, the ribbon turned to ash. Her body was her own again, but it felt altered, scarred. Something had been inside. She could still feel it like a phantom limb. The air around her no longer felt cold. It was empty. Her sister was gone, but not entirely. As she looked at the crib, she saw a small paper doll folded neatly with one word written on it: "Remember." The mirror, though cracked, showed only her now. But her eyes looked older, wiser, haunted. The house groaned again, but not in rage, in relief, as though something it had been holding for decades had finally been set free. Emily stood, weak and trembling. She didn't speak. She simply placed the pieces of the doll into a box, closed the nursery door gently, and whispered through the keyhole, "Goodbye, Annabelle." Down the hall, a music box played for the last time, slowing, warping, fading into silence. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a soft apology, casting golden rays across the rotting halls of Cranmore House. But inside, the light barely touched the cold, dust-choked corners. Emily sat in silence by the nursery door, her fingers trailing the grain of the wooden floorboards as if tracing memories she could finally see clearly. Afterwards, she finally saw. Her eyes were tired, but not afraid. The echoes of the house had changed, no longer heavy with sorrow, but hollow, quiet, unsure of what came next. In her lap, she held the box with the shattered pieces of the doll. A resting place, a coffin, a memory sealed. She descended the stairs with slow, deliberate steps, her body aching with exhaustion and the weight of truths long buried. Every creak of the wood beneath her feet felt gentler than before, like the house itself was no longer resisting her. In the parlor, morning light filtered through the broken window panes, illuminating floating dust like tiny ghosts suspended in air. She placed the box gently on the mantel, where the family portrait once stood. The photo was gone, burned in the fire or lost in time. But now, she could almost see it clearly in her mind. Two girls, smiling, whole. She took the ribbon, the one that had once adorned the doll, and folded it carefully, placing it on top of the box. It no longer felt cursed, just worn, like a forgotten part of her childhood returned too late to be reclaimed. The walls of the house no longer whispered. The cold had faded. And yet, the silence was deep, final, like something sacred had been laid to rest. She looked toward the front door. It stood slightly ajar, swaying in the soft breeze, no longer sealed shut by grief or guilt. It was an invitation to leave. But part of her hesitated. Emily turned back to the stairs and climbed once more, this time not out of fear, but remembrance. She entered the nursery and stood there quietly, watching the room in stillness. The crib was now upright. The chair stood motionless. The doll was gone, and yet its presence lingered like perfume. She stepped toward the mirror, cracked but whole, and saw her reflection. Just hers. Tired, older, but hers. Then, behind her, a flicker. A flash of a little girl in a pale blue dress. No fire, no burns, just a smile. For the first time, Annabelle didn't look sad. She looked free. The vision faded slowly, like a dream dissolving at sunrise. Emily touched the mirror, fingers trembling. "I remember," she whispered, and she did. Bits and pieces came back, not just of the fire, but of laughter, hide and seek, two voices singing the same lullaby. A twin she had known so deeply that losing her had ripped something out of her very soul. Her mother hadn't been mad. She had been mourning two daughters, one living, one lost. The doll had merely been a vessel for memory, for pain, and now it no longer needed to cry. It had been held. It had been seen. Back downstairs, the grandfather clock, silent for decades, ticked once, then again. Emily paused at the sound, eyes wide. Time, it seemed, had begun moving again within the walls of Cranmore House. She turned toward the door, the breeze fluttering the pages of her mother's old journal nearby. On the last page, in fresh ink, was a single line. "Thank you, Emily." Her throat tightened. The house had given back what it took, in pieces, in tears, in whispers, and now it was letting her go. Her mother's spirit, Annabelle's voice, the sorrow trapped in wood and stone, all were retreating, satisfied. Emily crossed the threshold of the front door and stepped into the soft warmth of the morning. The storm had passed. The grass was wet, but the air was fresh. Behind her, Cranmore House loomed, one final time, no longer monstrous, but mournful. A place of grief, yes, but also of reunion. She didn't look back again. Some places don't need to be watched. They only need to be remembered. The crying was over, and in its place, silence. Peaceful, earned, and deep. She walked down the gravel path with steady steps, each footfall lighter than the last, as if shedding the weight of years. Down the hill, in the distance, the town still slept, unaware of what had been awakened and what had been laid to rest. Emily paused once more at the edge of the property, glancing toward the attic window. For the briefest moment, a soft blue glow shimmered behind the glass, like a final goodbye. Then it vanished, swallowed by the sun. She smiled through tears and whispered, "Goodbye, Annie," a name she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. And somewhere behind her, unseen but felt, a small voice replied, carried gently on the breeze. "Goodbye, Emmy." That night, the nursery remained quiet. No crying, no rocking chair, just stillness. The house itself seemed to sigh, walls settling, beams relaxing. But if one listened closely, truly listened, they might still hear something gentle. Not a sob, not a scream, a hum. A soft lullaby carried by the wind through broken windows and drifting between empty rooms. Not haunting, not warning, just remembering, as if a sister, once lost, still walked the halls, not searching anymore, but watching with quiet love. Because the house didn't want to hurt. It only wanted to be remembered. Just like the little girl who cried at night. Years passed. Vines overtook the house once more. Boards fell. Nature reclaimed what grief had abandoned. Children grew up with stories of the crying doll, of the girl in the blue dress. Few dared approach. Fewer stayed long. But no one heard crying again. Only songs. Brief, flickering melodies that would fade when acknowledged. Legends were born, but none told the full truth. None knew the final embrace that had ended the sorrow. The story passed into myth, the pain into earth. And only Emily, far away now, kept the memory alive in her heart. Not as fear, but as family.